This here is an aurochs, a fierce, mean creature that walked the face of the earth back when we all lived in the caves. And they would gobble them cave babies down right in front of the cave baby parents.
Hi, guys, and welcome to another episode of Hollywood Gold. I'm your host, Daniela Taplin Lundberg, and I'm here with Bex Camerata.
Hi, Daniela.
We're about to dive into Beasts of the Southern Wild, which is a film that was produced by Josh Penn and many other fantastic producers, Michael Gottwald, Dan Janvey. The list sort of goes on. But Josh Penn is my brother-in-law, extending the pods with just family members.
I mean, this is so fun that you get to have little like family reunions because your family is a very impressive family in terms of their relation to the film industry.
Well, I'm so excited to dive in with Josh because, as we'll soon learn, I discover things about Josh that I never knew. And I think it's like a lesson to all of us loyal listeners, like just go take a family member and just like go out to lunch with them and just pepper them with questions. And I bet you will discover things you don't know. So I'm so excited to dive in. This movie was directed by Ben Zeitlin and was definitely the Cinderella story of, what year was it? 2012, maybe?
12.
And so I'm so excited to hear how they went off to New Orleans and just made this film and didn't expect for much to come of it. And then they ended up being nominated for Oscars and, you know, going on Oprah and, you know, doing all sorts of incredible things. So let's get going.
Let's do it.
Josh Penn, esteemed producer, brother-in-law, father of my niece, Ruth, love of my life. I'm so excited to have you here today. I've been begging you to come on for a while. I can't believe it's like the 51st episode and I finally just...
51st, that's impressive.
...convinced you. Well, I don't know. It's roughly that though, right? Right, Andrew? You know, there's so many of your movies that we could talk about, but we've chosen to talk about Beasts of the Southern Wild, which was like... I remember when that movie was bought in Sundance, it was like the biggest, you know, the number of years it took you to get there. And then it was just the ultimate Cinderella story. And Fox Searchlight came in and swept you guys up for a lot of money. And it was kind of the story that all independent producers were sort of jealous of. And then you guys went on to have like this incredible run and have real success at the box office, and the critics loved you and you were nominated for 4 Academy Awards. So it really was a crazy, crazy story from a very, very small movie that probably didn't expect all that. So Josh is one of the lead producers. I want you to take us back. First of all, hi. I haven't even given you a chance to say hello. Hi, friend.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited about this.
Okay, good. So, Josh, take me back to the very first memory of this story because it feels like it's such a different film. I was watching it again last night, and it's so impressionistic, and it doesn't fit into a box, and I feel like even today it doesn't fit into a box. And so I want to hear your very first memory of it, and then we'll just go from there.
I guess the first memory is before the movie started. Beast kind of came out of a short film we made called Glorietzi, which we made in New Orleans in 2007. Same producing team. Ben directed it.
Ben Zeitlin.
Incredibly
talented.
Directed Beast of the Southern Wild.
Yep.
It was the first thing I ever produced.
Really?
At all was that short film.
Oh, wow. So you had found this like collective of guys and you were like, we're going to live in New Orleans and produce movies, even though no one produces movies here. Was that sort of the vision?
Eventually. That was probably more the vision by the time we made Beasts.
Okay.
When I started in Glory, I thought I was going to be like a associate producer, PA for like 6 weeks, I wasn't interested in making movies and kind of fell into it.
Because Josh, you were a kid from like Brooklyn, like you went to St. Anne's, like you were like a real New Yorker. How did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, so I thought I was interested in like music and politics. And one of my friends from growing up went to Wesleyan, which was where a lot of this collective started.
Okay.
Me and him made movies together in high school. That's Ray Tintori, who was the Aurochs.
Oh my God. I didn't know you went to high school with Ray Tintori.
We went to middle school together at Packer.
Oh my God.
Yeah, extremely close friends, like throughout life. starting in, I guess, 8th grade.
Josh, this is crazy. I mean, Ray Tintori is worthy of his own like separate pod. He's sort of like a mystery within the independent film world, but continue.
So he called me. I had been touring with a band right after being working on a Senate campaign. And he called me and said, hey, you want to come down to New Orleans and help make this movie it'll be like 6 weeks. It'll be fun. You know how to like run things. I'd run a radio station and book shows. And
you'd run a radio station? During
college, I ran my college radio station.
Oh my God, Josh. I'm so sorry I don't know any of this.
This is why we have podcasts, right? So
you're my brother-in-law and you literally don't know any of this.
I mean, it was a shockingly long time ago for that.
Okay, but still, that's like all so fascinating. Okay, continue. I'm dying. Okay.
But I was on this whole other path of music and a little bit of politics.
Okay, cool.
And thought, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm 6 months out of college. Like, why not go down to New Orleans? It sounds like fun. I'll do it for a few weeks and then I'll go back to my life. And that movie ended up taking, instead of 6 weeks, it was like ended up shooting it for 6 months. It was probably to this day the craziest thing I've ever done. But it was really fun. That short film kind of had the kind of success you would hope to have with short films only get so big. But as far as a short film goes, it had a really big impact. And so people really loved it. And it opened up doors where we got to make this feature and we got to move back to New Orleans. Did
you go to festivals with that short film?
Yeah, we premiered it at South by Southwest.
Cool.
In 2008. A really interesting thing about it was it won an award. People loved it at South by, but then they started telling other people about it. One of those people told someone they needed to see this, who ended up seeing it like 9 months later at the Hamptons Film Festival, which, 9 months later, you've done so many film festivals. None of us even went. I mean, it's a great film festival, but you get fatigued. It costs money, even if they're covering it to some extent. And that person saw it, freaked out, and had just started a financing company called Cinderella. And basically got in touch with us. So in the fall of 2008, I was working on the Obama campaign, as were my two producing partners on the film, Gottwald and Janvey.
Okay.
And Ben got 2 calls. One was from the Sundance Institute asking if he wanted to apply to the Screenwriters Lab and if he had a script, which he said, yeah, I want to apply. I have a script, which he did not. So he had to write something very, very quick. But he said, if they call and ask you that, you just got to say yes.
You got to say yes. I mean, lesson to all our loyal listeners who are aspiring. Just always say yes. Lean in.
And then Cinderella called and said, we saw your movie Gloria Sea. We love it. We want to finance your feature. I guess that sometimes happens, but it's never real.
It's never happened to me.
And, at the time, it was like the first phone call we got, basically. And we're like, oh, okay, cool. These guys seem nice.
Yeah.
With them, we were a little more honest. We said, we have an idea for a feature, but we don't have a script.
Okay.
And so they basically wanted to support us in that period. And so we set out to make a movie with them very early on.
Okay.
Yeah. So Ben had he had gone to high school playwriting camp, I believe it was, with Lucy Alabar, the co-writer. And they'd been friends and had always shared everything they'd written together over the years. Lucy has this really distinct voice, and he had always had this idea of making one of her plays into a movie.
Okay.
And she had written this play called Juicy and Delicious, which Beasts of Southern Wild is based off of. There's a lot in there.
Okay.
And then he had also kind of fallen in love with New Orleans and Louisiana through living there for Gloria Sea and just getting to know the area. And he wanted to make a movie kind of about the people who stay.
Yes.
That was pretty soon after Katrina.
Yeah.
And, there's a big question that I think people who don't live down here, I still live in New Orleans. I stuck around after peace.
With my sister.
I think.
And my niece.
But yeah, there's a big question, especially at that time. People said, why would people continue to live down here? It's sinking. There's hurricanes. There's flooding. Just move somewhere else. And we wanted to make a story about that decision to being attached to the place and deciding to stay. The Beasts of Southern Wild is kind of the combination of those two. It's Juicy and Delicious meets kind of that.
What was the Juicy and Delicious log line?
It's more the father and the daughter story.
Okay, got it.
From Juicy and Delicious. Loosely based off Lucy and her dad, but I would say a very elevated, exaggerated. Juicy and Delicious is a much more off the wall, comedic. Lucy's hilarious, and it's a very, very funny play.
Okay.
So there's humor in Beasts, but I don't think you would call it a comedy.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
But if you saw Juicy and Delicious, you'd probably call it a comedy.
So Ben and Lucy set out to write a screenplay that Cinereach presumably will ultimately finance. Did they go through the screenwriting lab of Sundance?
Yeah, so they very, very quickly wrote a draft.
Like, we talking weeks?
That first draft must have been like, maybe it was 6 weeks, but you don't have...
Okay.
Like, we got that call, and I could be wrong in the timeline, but I feel like we got that call in September, and you have to submit it by like sometime in October, and then you're there in January.
Oh my God.
So they went with a first draft to the labs, and in between, they probably did a second draft once they got in, but they went with a draft that was very early and very rough and very insane.
How is the script received there?
It was received with extreme enthusiasm.
Wow.
And also like quite a bit of feedback. I think it was helped by the fact that it was based off a play. So
right. There was some structure.
There's some structure. There's some stuff that had been worked through, kind of built in. It's a first draft, but it's not as much of a first draft as I guess it could be.
Yeah.
Given that. But no, it has a lot of feedback, but there's something like totally unique in the script that excites people. And from very early on, it was one of those projects that people would read and they watch the short film and they just get excited and get behind it. And people kind of wanted to be behind it. There was something in the air. Did
you guys go through any of the other labs, like Director's Lab or Catalyst or any of that stuff?
So Catalyst didn't exist then, but Ben went through the Director's Lab, which then has a second Screener's Lab. And Janvi and I went through the Producer's Lab. So that was all that summer.
God. So the Sundance Institute basically invites young talent that they somehow can like get their eyes on, and they sort of invite them to these incredible, what they're called labs, and they're longer than a week. Josh, I've never actually been through any of
the Producer's Lab's, I think 5 days.
Okay.
And the Screener's Lab's about a week, and the Director's Lab's like 3 weeks.
In like beautiful Sundance, like at the resort, and you're invited to stay, and they bring all these experts, directors or writers or editors or whatever lab you've been invited to, and they take your project and they give you feedback. So it's like a hyper graduate school. And their goal is to get your movie made and help you get to that point. It's incredible. It really is like an incredible institution. When you say, Josh, it probably like changed your life a little bit.
Completely changed my life. The Producer's Lab is like a real turning point.
Incredible.
For me. And I think that is, this movie and the Producer's Lab are why I'm a producer.
Wow.
I think the Producer's Lab has helped redefine what it is to be a producer. Like, I think when I was there, it was the second or third year they had done it, but it's not a lab about like, here's how you budget.
Right.
Or here's how you schedule, or here's how you fundraise. It's a lab about like, here's how you are a 360 partner to your director, support to your film. You spend an entire day on communication.
Wow.
Some of it feels like therapy.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible. And we, amongst other things, it was helpful in a ton of ways, but we also met who ended up being our producing mentor, Paul Mazzei there, who was one
of the greats.
Our mentors for the week, who's incredible, one of the smartest people. It just clicked with him and he really got the project. I do remember being in the van from the airport with him, and all he knew was the script. And he was like kind of confused by it. I always remember he said like, is this a Rugrats movie? Like, it feels like this is like an animated Rugrats movie. There's like a lot more like physical humor still in it. There's like people like flying off like holding onto the fans and then going flying.
Oh my God.
But we really clicked with him. And so he came on to be our, mentor. I would say we were really, really ambitious and naive and didn't know what we were doing. And he was there to answer our questions and like kind of keep the train on the tracks.
He seemed to be a producer to me that like loved these kind of ambitious films that were like not in the mainstream. I remember he'd produced Maria Full of Grace, that like amazing film. And I just always remember like Paul being attracted to stuff that was like really tough.
Yes.
And he made it seem possible, because if he said it was possible, it was possible, No,
I think the movies I make are hard until I talk to Paul about other movies he's made, and then I get humble.
Okay, so you go through the labs, you come out the other end. What sort of evolved before you went to after you went? Like, did it become clear what the movie should be or would be?
So I should say at this point, basically starting in January 2009, we were basically working on the movie full time, which is unusual. Like, we weren't working on any other movies. New Orleans was very cheap back then. We all like shared a house.
Yeah.
And, we would occasionally pick up a gig for a week or two so that we could pay our rent for the next few months. But it was basically full time on the movie. And so we were making a lot of progress all the time through kind of the research. We were spending time down in the area of Terrebonne Parish where we shot the film. Ben and Lucy were writing drafts. And it was sort of like being in pre-production. I mean, it's not full on pre-production. We didn't have a full crew, but we were solving big problems of how you make this impossible movie for location scouting and casting for a full year before we shot.
And was Cinereach cash flowing at all? Like, were they going to finance the whole film? Did you even know what the budget was at that point? Like, how was that working?
I think we had a made up number that we all had said that wasn't based on anything of what the movie would cost.
Okay.
That I think ended up being too low.
Okay.
But, you make up you got to start somewhere.
Totally.
We had a ton of our friends doing casting work all the time, all across the state.
Just finding non-actors.
Yeah, the whole movie's non-actors.
Unbelievable.
And in specific, the kid. I mean, we knew that the movie only worked based on the power of who would play Hush Puppy.
Yes.
And that person needed to be very young. They'd probably never acted before. Maybe they'd never even thought about acting. And so we very early on started this statewide casting search that Michael Gottwald led and saw, I think it was over 3,000 children.
The whole universe depends on everything fitting together just right. If one piece busts, even the smallest piece, the entire universe will get busted.
Never take days off. I'm your daddy, and you're gonna do what I tell you to do. Because it's my job to keep you from dying, okay?
Were there ever moments where you're like, guys, should we look to some trained actor? Like, should we go to New York and LA and actually see a couple people who've done this before?
With the adults, we did a dual casting of non-actors and trained actors for basically two of the roles, for Father and for Miss Bathsheba.
You were going to look for trained actors, but also be open to non-trained actors.
Honestly, probably the opposite of we were looking for non-actors, but we were open to trained actors.
Okay.
But there was a real thought of we're going to have a kid who's so young, maybe they would benefit from the dynamic of being with someone who's acted before.
Yes.
And so, we took it really seriously. We hired a great casting director who worked on big films and was really thoughtful, narrowed it down. And it was really, the focus was on the father. That was the big, it's the second biggest role in the movie.
Yeah.
And we basically got it to the point where we had our top pick of the non-actor category, which was Dwight Henry, who ended up playing the role. And we had our top pick in the actor category. And we had already found Quivenjane, and we had them both kind of, we flew down the New York actor to spend a weekend, spending time with her. And we basically did the same with both of them, seeing what it was like with dynamics, with them doing scenes together, playing games.
Yeah.
And there was just something so much more natural and real about her interacting with someone who was from down there and was just lived a life that was slightly more similar. Also, maybe it's not in the training, maybe it's just in the people, but Dwight's incredible. And they immediately, there was just he had kids that were, a bit younger, but he was similar age, and was just the most amazing, warm individual. And it just worked.
Dwight Henry worked at a bakery, right? Or he owned a bakery. He was not an actor.
Not only was he not an actor, he for a long time really didn't want to be in the movie. He was we knew him because we had gotten, there was an abandoned school that after Katrina, there's all kinds of empty buildings, and they basically let every classroom be given to a different artist. And so our office was in this old school, and across the street there's a bakery, and he made it was just amazing food. So we'd go in there every day and get breakfast, and got to know him. He's like the warmest, like most amazing guy. We became friends with him. And so when we were auditioning people, we kept being like, hey, will you audition? And he kept refusing.
Oh my God.
And eventually, like, we wore him down and he just wanted us to stop asking. So he said yes. And then it turned out he was amazing, and he had gotten himself into something he really was not prepared or and didn't want. Like, most people hear that and they get very excited, and he turned us down a few times.
Oh my God. He was like, oh, what a headache. This is going to really like disrupt my bakery business.
Yeah.
I had also read that like you had sort of identified him, soft circled him, and then he like moved to another bakery. Like you guys couldn't even find him for a couple weeks. Like that was kind of the deal.
Yeah, no, he did his first audition. By the time we watched and realized it was amazing and that he was like one of our top choices, that bakery had closed. And I don't know. I think we didn't even have his phone number because we would just
go find him to get a breakfast sandwich. Sure, I'm sure.
So this was like a lot in the early days. A lot of my job seemed to be just like detective work and trying to figure out where people who we wanted to work with were. And so I think it took us like 2 months to find him again. And then he opened up a new bakery.
Right.
But then it was even more complicated for him because he was like, I'm opening up a new bakery. I don't have time to, really don't have time to do this. But eventually we convinced him to do it. And one of the things we had to do, so he not only owned the bakery, but he was the head baker. It was like a real like small business, and it was a breakfast business. So his hours of baking were like 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. Like, so he'd sleep during the day and he'd bake at night. And so the arrangement we made with him is we would send someone in while he was baking. His hands would be covered in dough, and they'd read him his lines. And he would go back and forth. And that was because he
couldn't stop baking.
And his hands were covered. So we just need to, he was like, I can learn my lines if someone's here with me.
No, stop.
While I'm doing the thing I'm doing.
That is incredible. That I'm going to tell you, that's genius producing. You're ensuring that your non-actor is going to show up on set and like know the lines. That's freaking amazing, Josh. Oh my God. And so that was Dwight, which I love that story so much. How did you find Kavenzane? Like, how did you narrow her down from like 3,500 people?
Yeah, Michael Gottwald did this hugely expansive casting search. We went across the state of Louisiana, went to like every school, every community center, just like
hung
flyers in every supermarket, or, if you're a kid and you want to audition for a movie, and like each town, we would find a space where we could hold an audition, and we recruited a bunch of friends to kind of help with this effort. It was quite a bit. We saw over 3,000 kids. At first, we thought we wanted to be an older kid. I think we were saying like 9 to 11. And then it turned out we did a bunch of those auditions. We're like, oh, actually, that's too old. Mm-hmm. Like the kids who are a little younger, when you get to that age, you get like a little self-conscious, and there's just like, you're a bit less in your imagination.
Yeah.
Which we didn't know because we were, 24, and what do we know about kids?
Right.
So then we switched, I think, to 6 to 9 was the age. And she lied about her age in our audition. She was 5 when she auditioned.
No way.
But it was like a friend of the family saw a poster in, some local store and called her mom and said, hey, I wonder if Kavenzane would enjoy trying out for this. And she was like, oh, it's Saturday. Like, we're not doing anything. Maybe that'd be a fun thing to do. And, it's just one of those things, you know it when you see it. Like, we didn't know what we were looking for, but we kind of just knew. We always use the word the person needs to have IT, which is just it.
Yeah.
And like, that is a thing, even with a little kid. And also, like, a kid's only going to be able to, like, they're acting, but also they need to bring, all non-actors, but especially a kid probably just needs to be somewhat who they are, bringing themselves to the role. We always knew we'd write a script, and then the script would have to meet the people, and like the character would become something in between the two.
Was Ben very encouraging of like what felt right in the moment, and like that kind of back and forth between the actors?
Yeah, so that was always part of the design, was you write a script and then you go through this kind of rehearsal play process with the kids and the non-actors. Mm-hmm. And maybe you start with the lines, but then you kind of say, like, make this your own.
Yeah.
And you ad-lib with them, or you give them the scenarios and they do things, and Ben would kind of take notes throughout. So some of it would be maybe one of the actors would say something in rehearsal, and then that would get written into the script. And then probably some of it was day of, but mostly it was from things they had said before that he kind of picked as like, that's it. That's the best way.
I found, and like my next question goes to the visual world that was created that feels so authentic, but also kind of like hyper real. Like it feels a little surreal. And like there is the real world beyond the bathtub that's filled with factories and, you know, all sorts of things that are sort of destroying the beauty of the natural world, it seems. That feels like such a holistic vision. Was that the thing leading Ben from the get-go, like that visual natural world that you guys created?
I mean, a lot of the movie is location-based, but it's very, very specific in terms of, you know, what's in the frame. And
yeah,
I guess it was a good mix that, you know, the hero sets are mostly not, or a lot of it's built, especially interiors.
Yeah.
Hush Puppy's house that she lives in, where the movie starts, like Ben's sister built that on the property of our headquarters, like from scratch. Like that's 100% built and is totally fabricated magic.
Was she a production designer, or was she just like, I'm like a build?
She's just a like extremely creative person who, you know, went to RISD and just built magical things, mostly for practical reasons, not like,
oh my God,
in a gallery.
Okay, love that.
You know, it's like mostly for her pets. Like she'll, you know, build kingdoms for her 100 animals.
But it felt very of New Orleans. Like, you know, having gone down to visit you guys, there is a quality of like patchwork that's really a part of the set. Was it inspired by obviously the world around you a little bit?
I remember one of the first things we did was wanted to find like what is the bathtub? Like we already had the concept, but we hadn't actually found the place. And we like looked at a map and we knew we wanted to feel like the end of the world in some way. Like that was built into the concept. And we just drove to the end of every road and would see what the towns were like. And we came to Isle de Jean Charles and Pointe-aux-Chênes, and it was just so clear that was it. Like there was just something. I mean, Isle de Jean Charles, which is probably the place the bathtub most based after, and a good deal of the movie shot there, but not all of it, is this island that is, you know, it's a fraction of the size that it used to be. It's literally just sinking in. There's the one road, which is the last shot of the movie, that gets there, and every few years that road gets destroyed, which is the only way onto the island.
Jesus Christ.
And it's like falling apart, and they rebuild it. And, you know, the population's really, really shrunk, but there's the people who, like, every storm hits them. They say, this is where we're from. This is where we're staying. And so that was kind of like the spiritual home of the film.
So how much of the movie did you shoot there?
We shot a fair amount there. There was 3 major towns where we shot, and they're kind of right next to each other.
Are we talking weeks there?
Yeah, probably. Maybe we shot 2 weeks there. I mean, we shot over the course of 48 days.
Oh my God.
Like 48 shooting days.
Oh my God.
And so probably 2 weeks for there.
Josh, I mean, you know, we can both agree that in this day and age, we're lucky to get like 25 to 30 days on an independent film. And so that, again, feels like so luxurious. I assume it was non-union film.
Not sure if I would call anything about the movie luxurious.
But just in terms of amount of time, probably nothing else.
Yeah, it was, I would say it was beyond non-union.
You know, you guys had so much water work, like so much work on the water. Like I had one day of water work on this movie, Nanny, and it was like the number of like security measures that we had to take in order to like be on the water for one day. It was almost like, this is stupid. This is so ridiculous. It's not that deep. Like my kids are always saying that. It's not that deep, Mom. And I'm like... That's such a perfect metaphor for the film business, you know? And it's because of the insurance and the bonds and all these things that like things that actually shouldn't be that complicated become that complicated. And so can you just practically talk me through how you got all that water stuff done? Did you just have like the boat you built and then another boat? Like how did it work practically?
I mean, everything in this movie was making up some... Like it was reinventing the wheel on how you do it. And a lot of the water stuff, we found a local guy who was like a big boats guy who just lived in the town, who knew everyone in the region who had a boat and had boats of his own, and he would just source the boats and drive them. He was like our local fixer. His name's Mike Arsenault.
Oh my God.
Now, like,
I love it.
Does a bunch of other films where,
You like introduce him to the film community?
Yeah, and anytime anyone we now get the calls of people being like, I need to do something in Terrebonne Parish, or I need to do something with boats in the state, and he's
the guy.
He's one of these people who everyone you meet and everyone just like loves him immediately. And
is Mike Arsenault the guy who, like, I heard that like the BP oil spill happened when you guys were like shooting or around the time, and like no one could get through, but like your guy got you through and you were allowed to shoot?
That'll be
as planned.
Yeah. I mean, we haven't even gotten there, but day one of principal photography, BP oil spill happens.
Oh my God.
That's like right where we are.
Oh my God.
So like a bunch of our big locations literally get taken over by BP for their their cleanup crews. And we have to figure out how to navigate around.
Shut up.
It didn't matter that the water was gone. Sometimes you can break something so bad that it can't get put back together.
Come on, man.
And like literally we were calling like BP reps. I guess as opposed to most bureaucracy, like it was such a bad situation that they were very inclined to try to be helpful to people.
Like they didn't want to make more enemies?
Right. They had made enough enemies, and like actually what they were doing was more probably of a public relations campaign in some way than a environmental campaign.
Okay, so you got a little bit lucky there.
We got a little bit lucky. I mean, we had to rejig our entire schedule around BP, but we made it work.
Can you just tell me briefly about the aurochs and just creating them and like that sort of practical effect? I assume they were like actually on set. What were they?
I mean, of all the kids and water, like we did all the things. There's also creatures, like giant creatures written into the script. And we're never going to make the movie for a big budget. And so we decided we're going to basically find real animals and put them in costumes. So we trained baby potbelly pigs and built costumes for them and put them in miniature environments. And this is a department where there's not people you can hire who are like, oh yeah, I've done that before. So it was based off of, I want to say Willow. They did this with dogs, but dogs are
more trainable,
a bit easier and more trainable. But that was the inspiration was, they did this thing in Willow. We'll just do the same thing with pigs. And
it's not even like you have the experts from Willow. You're just like, I heard they did this in Willow.
But like even like pig trainers isn't really a thing.
Right, right. I heard they're so smart though.
We brought in Ray Tintori, who'd been Ben's like long time kind of closest collaborator, one of my closest friends, and basically said, it's your job to figure out how to make this work. And so he had this whole separate unit. We were down in the Bayou shooting, and he had a separate unit in New Orleans, basically figuring out just how to do these creature shots. So he was in pre-production while we were in production. And on our off days, we would drive up to New Orleans and kind of check in with them, see how it was going. And then as soon as we finished regular principal photography, we went into 7 days of shooting with these baby pigs.
Oh my God.
But we literally, it was like, we had friends who were like, you like animals, you're smart, you're willing to do this. Here's a book about training pigs. Like, they figured it out, and the pigs like stayed in their house. It was baby pigs are like really, really, really sweet. And then as they get older, they like increasingly get less sweet. So like we got a baby pig in development who by the time we were ready to shoot was already in like past the trainable, like, and into the grumpy age. So it was, but a bunch of the pigs still live on the Kate Bryant, who was the head pig trainer. His family has a farm, and the pigs still like live on our family farm.
So I want to cut through to like actual shooting, what your observations were about Ben as a filmmaker, and like what was sort of the magic sauce of the production.
A lot of the magic sauce of the production was the crew. Like we put together this incredible crew, which is a really untraditional crew.
Yeah.
And so it's like really a community making a film together and on an adventure together. No one lived in these towns. I mean, we would hire some local, but it was probably 100 people came down to make this film from all over the country.
Wow.
It was this kind of like summer camp vibe where we were all like having a great time. Most of us were, you know, a few years out of college.
Right.
And I remember doing hiring calls, and it was almost like a process of trying to talk people out of them being interested. Like you want to cut to the chase and not have someone come down and be like, oh,
right.
this, I really don't want this. So you'd almost like oversell
how bad it was,
how hard and crazy it was. It was really hard.
Yeah.
But it was also really magical and like a totally one of a kind moment in life. And I think in general, like everyone was exhausted and like, you know, people get grumpy because you're exhausted and it's hard, but it was a lot of fun.
The thing that I had heard is that you guys took a long time to edit, and that
Yes.
like it took a while to find the edit. And you had Fonzie, right? You had Alfonso Goncalves, who is like one of the great editors, who at that time was quite seasoned, or was he sort of new?
He was seasoned. I mean, he had done a lot of great stuff. He was certainly more seasoned than any of us.
Okay.
And he came on like halfway through our edit. We brought him on.
So you had another editor, and then you were like, we need an experienced pair of eyes and hands here.
Yeah, to work with him. It was a department where we hadn't followed that same rule to start. And then it went really well when we were able to match those two things together, and every department was where it went the best.
Right.
And we just hadn't started there with the edit.
So how long were you guys in the edit sort of finding the magic?
Over a year. We had our last day of shooting on July 3rd, 2010. We thought we were going to aim for Sundance 2011, which would have been, 6 months later.
Sure.
We decided to, we had an edit together. I actually think probably could have gotten accepted to the festival. We didn't submit, but I think it was one of those things, could have gotten accepted to the festival. And again, we wouldn't be here. Like it would have been,
right.
Movie would have been fine. It would have had like some people who thought it was like really cool and weird, but didn't like fully click yet. And we decided it was a really hard decision because that had been our life plan for years, we're going to go to that Sundance. Probably since that first call from the Sundance Labs, we kind of had that schedule in mind. And then all of a sudden we kind of knew Sundance was the place where this movie should premiere. So then you're literally like adding a year, or you're losing a year of your life as you miss that deadline. But it was 100% the right decision. But then you also think like, okay, so we'll edit for 3 more months and then we'll like sit on the film. And we ended up going to Sundance with, we had to like fly with our Digibate. I don't remember what it was.
Like you were still editing up until Sundance 2012.
We weren't still editing, but we were still finishing the film up until like 4 days before.
What I want to talk about is the Sundance sort of like Cinderella moment and premiering it. And because it was so different from anything else, did you feel nervous? Did you feel like people weren't going to totally understand it? Or did you think maybe it would just be a small film that like was appreciated, but not become this like incredible?
It was a funny thing of the entire feeling of making the movie was people, like it had this magnetism to it, like from very early on, where people like wanted to believe in it and got attached to it. And so there was some sense of like, oh, some amount of people like this. And we had this experience with our short film where, again, it's a short film, so it's a small audience, but some people had an outsized reaction to it. And we kind of had some sense that this had that quality. We did a lot of test screenings, and I remember there was like a moment in the summer of 2011, which is, a full year into editing, where we started feeling that the reactions, like something had clicked and people's reactions started to feel much more enthusiastic. Not like this is a cool, weird movie, to like, oh, wow, there's something really amazing here.
Wow.
So I think we had some feeling that there would be a audience for it, but certainly didn't expect what happened. And we went to, you start doing the thing you do with every film. You take it to sales agents to see who wants to sell it. And we'd already been getting those kinds of reactions, but then you take it to the sales agents, and for the most part, they were kind of befuddled by it. Not like, they were like, this is cool. will not say who, but like very prominent sales agent passed on it and said like, like if you really want us to do this as a favor, like maybe come back to us, because like no one may say yes to you, but
oh my God.
But like I don't know how to sell this thing.
Right.
And Graham Taylor saw it and loved it, who was at WME at the time and now runs Endeavor. And he loved it. But I remember he also said, he's like, I love this. This is amazing. This is unlike anything. Yeah. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know if I can sell this for more than $1, but I really want to try. And that was, I remember him saying that. We're like, yeah, of course. Like,
right.
Like, but that's the attitude of everyone who's gotten on board with this film is like, this thing's insane. But for some reason, I feel a magnetism towards it. So I want to be part of the team. And so when he said that, we're like, oh, okay, you get it. All we can ask is that you want to be part of the team and that you get it.
I had a movie there, that Sundance too. But I remember going, because you'd have this like circle up meeting with your sales team, and our sales team was WME, and we went to their condo before whatever the week begins, right? It's like Friday afternoon, like meet up, let's strategize, whatever. That's useless, but you do it so you can look people in the eye and be like, here we go, because you don't know how the town's going to react. Some react like poorly, some become like you have your Cinderella story. But I remember going in and sitting with him and Deb and someone else, maybe Mark Ankner, and all Graham could talk about was your movie and being like, I don't know what it is, but I think it's going to be big. And then I remember talking to Ray Strachey, who was the head of acquisitions, or like just under the head of acquisitions at Fox Searchlight, and him being like, this is my baby. This is the one I'm going to take all the way. And I think you just had like really passionate advocates for it because it needed it. It wasn't like you could hang your hat on some big star or something like that. It was just like you guys had like done the work and made something completely original. And I think that when true artists see that, they want to like help, they want to like embrace that and support it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was a really magical. And there was a thing that happened there where we did our first screening in the Eccles, which is the big 1,200 seat theater. It's 6 times bigger than any other theater you can play at there. The first Friday at noon, which is like everyone still is in like, I want to see like a great movie. They haven't gotten tired of watching movies yet. They've gotten through opening night, and it's like a prime slot in the biggest theater. And I think about this a lot. So that room was like electric and magical, and it's one of those things where I would say not a month goes by that I don't end up having a meeting with someone where they're like, I was in that room.
I was there.
And they want to tell me the story of being like the feeling in that room.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's not the right answer for every film, but I don't know if this movie has this journey had it premiered in a different room. Like there was something about whatever was, and we had, right. I should say, we also brought in our entire crew. Like we brought in 120 people and rented the entire like Best Western 40 minutes outside of town.
Stop.
And like got buses, and
that stuff matters. How you feel in a room matters, especially when you have all the buyers from Hollywood who've flown in for 3 days. I love that. Okay. Amazing.
But yeah, had we played in a different room, who knows?
Yeah.
It's an underdog movie that it's I've worked on a bunch of beautiful movies that people have said, oh, I love this, but it's just too hard. And this movie is also too hard in a lot of ways, but people decided to take the bet on it, and it worked.
I mean, I just watched an interview that Ben had with Oprah Winfrey, who like she could not stop gushing about the movie. And I'm like, she like insisted on having Ben on her like Sunday whatever series one-on-one. Right. And it's like, how many people in the world get that? And you guys did. You captured the imagination of so many people. And like you were nominated for 4 Oscars. It's crazy. It's like, it's the reason I think we all stay in this business, because we believe good things like that can happen. And that great art sometimes really is embraced for what it is, just like original vision. And so I will just part with you saying, I'm so impressed. And I was so reminded of like why we do this. It's why I do this pod, Josh. And I think we just have to keep going, because there are not that many producers like you in the world who are just like, I'm all in. I'm going to follow my filmmaker to the ends of the earth, literally, and make this incredible thing. And once in a while it works. And so you did good. You did good, man. Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. This has been super fun.
I adore you. Please give Blythe my love. Give her a hug and kiss. Give Ruthie a hug and kiss, and I'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon.
Everybody loses the thing that made them. It's even how it's supposed to be in nature. The brave men stay and watch it happen. They don't run. When I die, the scientists of the future, they're gonna find it all. They're gonna know. Once there was a hush puppy, and she lived with her daddy in the bathtub.
So Bex, that was a story that like could have continued forever. It felt like such a journey for Josh and Ben and Dan and Michael and all these like incredibly youthful, smart, mostly guys who went and made this movie and then like edited it forever and ever, but then ended up, you know, having this incredible Sundance experience, having Fox Searchlight come and buy them, pick them up, and then having this incredible experience in theaters. The movie was like financially successful. It was critically successful. It got nominated for all these awards. But I want to know what you were struck by, because there was something very significant that I was struck by, but I wanted to hear your impressions first.
Well, you said this at the top of the episode, but this really was an example of a Sundance Cinderella story, right? And I think that's becoming harder to do. Those stories are becoming fewer and far between just because of how the market is changing. And you used to be able to have these all-night bidding wars at Sundance from these traditional distributors. And now that the streaming services have entered the game and kind of dominated the game for the past few years, that's harder to do. So I think that I was struck by how resourceful these producers were in the story, you know, that the fact that, you know, Josh had never produced a film before and he was working on the Obama campaign. By the way, did you know that? Did you know that he had left?
Of course not. I knew nothing of that. I like went and told the entire family. Of course, no one knew. I mean, he like had such a crazy 20s, you know, and he was responsible like for the digital media arm of the Michigan, you know, election for Obama. I was just like, this is insane that I don't know this.
Such a crazy story.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's incredible.
But it was cool for me to hear how idealistic and optimistic he was, having not had film experience. And because of that, just doing all these things that I feel like a more experienced producer would never have done, right? Just decide to keep this non-union, it's non-SAG, even though it was a pretty, you know, it wasn't a high budget, but it was a budget that should be SAG, right? And should be union. And the fact that they just kept going to this one bakery and get this guy to audition because the real actors that they were flying in weren't the right fit. Like, there were just so many parts of this story that made me realize that that's kind of where the magic came from of this movie, because this movie is magical. It's still magical. It's still so beautiful to watch, and to hear the story behind it and how they really just kind of pushed their way through it, just not knowing quite what they were doing. And I think that adds to how beautiful it is.
I could not have said it better. That was exactly what I was struck by. As I was sort of riding on the subway today, fighting with this AI company to get our money back from this failed experiment of social media. And you were getting out the K1s to our investors, which you like have to slog through every year. And we are a company that really like, we're nuts and bolts. We do it all. There is nothing we don't touch. We don't really outsource anything so much that we're not understanding like how the machine works. Mm-hmm. I will admit that I hope there is a time where we can outsource everything and that we aren't generating the K1s on our own. But the point is that Josh and Ben and Dan and Michael and all those guys didn't know what they couldn't accomplish. And so they just went and did it. And like, I love the story of the boat guy they found on the coast of Louisiana who just handled all the water work. Like, in what world is there some guy with a boat just like handling all the water work, you know?
Yeah.
It's like you have that version, and then you have Waterworld, which is like it's like $100 million version of like a water film. And this is a water film. This is like deeply, deeply a water film that was accomplished for like under $1 million. And it looks beautiful, and it looks incredible, and it looks authentic, and all the things you would want to achieve in a film, this film achieves. But they just didn't know that they weren't allowed to do it, that they weren't taking maybe all the proper, safety precautions, and it wasn't union regulated on all these things, but they still managed to do it. And so watching that movie, it sort of reminds you that like our business and any business tries to overcomplicate things all the time and convince you that you can't do things for one reason or another. And I just love that this movie is like totally a counter to that notion. I remember when I was like really, really young, starting in the business, that someone asked me like, how do you option material? How do you option a script or a book? And I was like, well, I just copied an option I saw like off the internet. And the person was like, well, can I see what that is? And she showed a lawyer friend, and the lawyer friend was like, yeah, this is exactly what an option is. And like, now we pay lawyers like $600 an hour, $200 an hour, or whatever it is to like execute an option. Like it's some complicated thing that we can't figure out ourselves,
Yeah.
Anyways, that's a long rant to say that like Beasts of the Southern Wild really reminded me of just rolling up your sleeves and getting it done. So
yeah,
I love the story so much. And then like they went on to such incredible success, and people were so completely dazzled and charmed by the originality of it. So anyways, it was just so great. It was so great. Bexy, so why don't you remind us of some of the fun facts that our loyal listeners should absolutely know at this point?
Well, a couple of these Josh touched on a little bit in the interview, but this first one I thought was very interesting, and I don't remember Josh saying this. Director Ben Zeitlin revealed in a 2012 interview that he never looked at dailies until after the shoot was finished.
Oh.
Which is, I think, very interesting.
That's so unusual. That is so unusual.
Yeah.
I think most filmmakers are reviewing dailies daily in case they need to pick something back up, or they didn't get something, or they're not going in the right direction. And there's often a lot of financiers and producers and other people sort of looking over the shoulder of filmmakers, especially first-time filmmakers, making sure they're getting what they need. And so this, again, just a totally different approach that they took, and it obviously ended up working.
Yeah, I think that's so interesting, because I don't know, if I were director, I don't know that I would be able to not look.
Oh my God.
The self-control that it would take to know that you can watch some of the footage that you spent so much time
I'd be obsessive,
making.
I think. Yeah.
I think I would be obsessive too. So I feel like that's a huge testament to his self-control, that you just didn't look at dailies and trusted what he was getting.
Yeah.
So this is kind of an expansion of something that Josh said, but in the Sundance workshop phase, there was no formal script for Beasts of Southern Wild, and the co-writers Ben Zeitlin and Lucy Alabar shared a moment of panic when they quickly had to combine their two separate ideas into one that would work.
This could have so easily gone wrong. This movie could so easily have been a disaster. It
was really just like conceptual until Sundance was like, send us a script. And they're like, oh, I guess we need to make a script.
It's just like every step of this process feels like it should have gone wrong, and then it didn't. I mean, obviously they're extremely talented, but this movie makes no sense. Like, you're reminding me, I'm like, what? They had to combine two scripts that had nothing to do with each other? Cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the other one is just about the money that it made. So it was sold to Fox Searchlight for $2 million. The production cost total was pegged at $1.8 million, and it made $23 million.
Fantastic.
So
fantastic.
An indie success story. This is kind of like what we aim to achieve whenever we decide to make an indie movie.
The reality is, if you can keep the budget of the film down, and then the MG, the minimum guarantee of what is paid, is low, then the prospect of profits goes up, because then your studio doesn't have to recoup as much before you're participating. So I would imagine, I mean, I'll have to ask Josh, but like, I would imagine those guys saw some nice back end on the film. I hope.
I would think so.
I would hope. That's awesome. That makes me so happy to hear.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we love you so much. Who are we shouting out today, Andrew? Jody. Jody at iHeartRadio listens to every single one of our pods. I've just been informed that she is a true loyal listener. I love her so much. We may just have to get her a sweatshirt. And I just love hearing that. I love, love, love hearing that. And guys, don't forget about our awesome merch. We're getting more and more sales. It's so fun. People keep sending us pictures. It's so great. You can do a Hollywood Gold hoodie, or you can do a Stay Gold hoodie, which is the name of our production company.
Or you could do both.
StayGoldFeatures.com. All right, guys, we love you so much. Don't forget to follow, suggest some movies you want us to explore. I think we're trying to do like a good combo meal of like pop culture, classic films, and then new things coming out. But we want to make sure they're all legacy films. So I think we are accomplishing that, but just tell us if you think we're missing something. Okay, guys, don't forget.
Stay gold.
Stay gold.